as to who would like to continue in a plenary, full plenary group discussion, or those who would like to break into smaller groups. Those who'd like to break into smaller groups, please. Those who would like to stay in plenary. Okay, that is the majority, so we will stay in plenary. So, on that note, a couple of people have asked me to pose questions for them because they didn't want to say themselves. Is Councillor Ian Myers still in the room? He is. Okay. There is a question from Councillor Myers around health tourism, and I'm going to ask Susan, I think, to pick this one up. Sorry to put you on the spot, Susan. If you could finish your sandwich and get to a mic, that would be good. At least you've had a sandwich, I haven't yet. So the question from Councillor Myers is, what impact does health tourism have on service delivery?
So it's not an issue in East Kent. We have obviously a small number of people who are tourists for tourism reasons, you know, going to Leeds Castle and Dover Castle and that kind of thing. And if they get taken ill, they've got insurance. We also have a few people that are often taken ill on the M20 going to and from Dover. But the kind of health tourism is people that have come to the UK specifically to seek health care, and people who are doing that don't tend to come to a place like East Kent.
Okay, thank you. Another question from a councillor. There's lots of shy councillors in the room, but it's around orthopaedics, and I'm just trying to read this writing. Will elective surgery be less likely to be postponed or cancelled under either of the options? Susan, I think this is one for you. Having had to go to Calais for a hip replacement, so I think the question is, somebody's had to go to Calais for a hip replacement this year, so are you likely to have less postponements or delays under either of the options, or are they the same?
They're the same. They're the same.
Okay, all right, that's answered that. Okay, anybody?
And just to make it clear, that means that you're not going to have a cancellation because of emergency pressures, because the planned work is separated, and it's the same in both options.
Okay. So, I'm going to go to this gentleman here, please. Okay.
Thank you. Tony Lake, Parish Councillor at Cable. To have developed these option 2, particularly as far as you have, I assume you have some confidence about the deliverability of the 2,000 houses. So my question is, are those 2,000 houses planned on land that's already allocated in the District Council's local plan, or is it purely speculative?
Okay. Who wants to take that question? I'm looking towards the Chief Executives here. Somebody's going to pick that one up, please.
I've got some of the answer. I think a bit of the answer. We don't know the answer. We neither of us know the answer.
Okay, can you use a mic, please?
Right.
Yes, I think I'm beyond my scope of expertise, really. As far as I'm aware, or at least certainly what I had been advised, was that the housing are not currently in the current plan, but they would have been in the next plan because of the closeness to the major transport junctions.
Okay, so rather than speculate on this, can we take that question away and find an answer for? Yeah, okay, and move on. Okay, gentleman at the end there. I'm going to work down this row.
Yes, I found the presentation very interesting. It's nice to see so many clinicians doing it. But what's missing to me, coming from the marsh, is the map of the region showing where the hospitals are, where the major roads are going to be, or are now, the growth in demographics over the next 10, 20 years, that will point us to where the best location would be from that point of view. I mean, the growth in Ashford is phenomenal, but why is that detail there? Because people...
Otterpool.
It should be Otterpool Park, there's another one. 30,000 eventually, but this information is critical for people to get a view.
Okay. I think point well made. More evidence, more impact required. Hand the mic down for me. Sorry.
Okay, Susan Carey, I'm one of the Kent County Councillors. I represent Elam Valley,
Hello.
which will have Otterpool Park in it, which is up to 10,000 houses over the next 30 to 40 years, not 30,000, Tony. And indeed, I was talking with some of the GPs about how we can plan for that in the future. But my question was about, you've rightly reminded us that 90% of the care we get is outside hospital, and even within hospital, the accident and emergency is the tiny minority. However, it's the tiny minority that everyone gets really frightened about. And you said before that people get their elective surgery cancelled in order to accommodate emergencies when you haven't got capacity. How can you be sure that in what you're planning, your specialisation will give you the improvement in service that you need in order not to need this extra capacity? Because it sounds at the moment as though you've actually got a safety valve built into each hospital. Please try and explain how that works in now and in the future.
Okay, I'm going to go to a clinician to answer that, please. So can we get a mic to a partner, please? And then maybe one of you can pick it up. Thank you.
Hi, I think that's a really good question. And actually I think that in differentiating services, we use loads of technical terms, and we know from Lorraine that we shouldn't do that. But planned operations, I think, can be ring-fenced and protected if they happen on a different hospital site to where major emergencies are managed. And that's not something that I believe in, even though I do believe in this, but it's not just me that believes in this. This is happening in models of care all around the country, where things like cancellations of operations are not tolerated, because actually it's not fair to patients, it's not fair to the disruption within your life, but it's also not fair to how you continue to remain active and mobile as you get older. So in terms of differentiating services, planned services need to be taken away from where major emergencies and specialist services are dealt with, so that planned services can carry on regardless of what the demands are to other services.
Susan, do you want to jump and use that mic?
Thank you. I think it's a good question, and it's one that clinicians have been looking at, and it comes down to the issue of whether if you do more of something, you get better at it. So volumes are very important in improving the overall efficiency of the service, but the overall outcomes for the patient. So there is quite a lot of evidence developing around this, and some hospitals who've developed emergency-only centres are demonstrating that they've got shorter lengths of stay. But interestingly, for orthopaedics in particular, there is growing evidence that if you focus your hip and knee surgery in one place, you're doing high volumes, you have reduced lengths of stay and reduced infections. But actually the National Director for Orthopaedics has asked us to be part of a sort of a pilot to gather that evidence, because it is quite important if you're making changes that the changes are evidence-based. So we're actually going to be part of that pilot to look at the evidence. But the particular things around orthopaedics is length of stay. Obviously, people don't want to be in hospital very long, and infection rates.
Okay. Anybody who hasn't spoken need to make a point? Want to make a point? Okay, I'm going here. Sorry, Tom.
Hello, yes.
What's your name?
Sorry?
What's your name?
Oh, sorry, Pam Mellor,
Pam.
resident of New Romney. If my local knowledge and memory serves me correctly, and if the potential site for the Canterbury-based facility is on the Thannington site, 2 or 3 years ago, Quinn Developments, in association with a couple of other organisations, another developer and a charitable foundation, offered to build a new hospice for Canterbury there. Does anybody know from the authority, I know that it is not under their auspices, but whether that is still part of this development, or the hospital has become a bigger carrot than a new hospice at Canterbury?
Okay, that's a new question for me at least. Does anybody know the answer to that? Can we take that one away?
No, not that we're aware of. So I've had no. Oh, sorry. I've had no discussion in relation to hospice, so it certainly needs to be. So it's not something that I'm aware of in anything that's certainly been discussed with us.
Okay, so let's do some research and make sure that we've got that one bottomed out. Thank you.
Thank you. I was wondering how many areas in the country are doing this right now? Because during Upasena's presentation, she sort of showed, the sort of network of hospitals.
Yeah, can we click that one through, Julia, just to remind people?
So you could see on that there was like specialist emergency centres and elective care, and the things were separated out, and you had your different types of care separated. So is that happening anywhere? How many places is that actually happening elsewhere in the country? Because it was sort of implied that it's...
So just in terms of the pilot I just mentioned about the National Director for Orthopaedics asking us to be involved, so what I can tell you is that he's asked us to be involved with Gloucester and Cheltenham, Kings, Cornwall, North East Lincolnshire. So those are the hospitals that we're kind of actually involved with assessing that particular area. But I think if you just look even at the hospitals in Kent, you can see that differentiation occurring already in terms of things being focused. It's pretty commonplace now.
But just to be clear, it hasn't actually happened anywhere else. It's happened in Northumbria, hasn't it?
It's happened in Northumbria, and Gloucester and Cheltenham have just done.
Oh, it has happened in Gloucester and Cheltenham. Okay, so that means they've got separate specialist acute hospitals there.
Can you speak into the mic? Sorry, because it needs to be...
Yeah, so the major emergency centre is Gloucester and the planned care centre is Cheltenham.
Okay, so that's like 2 or 3 places in the country, not very many as yet.
But they're the ones we're working with.
So I think actually you see right across the UK and internationally, you see lots of people doing this. So I know if you look in Scotland, somewhere where I used to work, we had exactly that. And the interesting thing about having planned care was I know that sometimes people where, again, it was on a hospital site that didn't have an A&E, and actually it ran really smoothly, and the patients really liked it. And the reason they liked it was because they got there, their appointments were never cancelled, so they always got seen. The team had things down to a fine art because they were never being diverted away to do anything else. So all of your physio, all the things that you needed were actually managed really, really well. And what we found was that actually patients' experience of those planned care sites was so good that the patients were telling their relatives, no, actually, you want to go there. So this isn't something which is unusual. It's something that's happening in lots of places, and certainly my personal experience of that is the patients really like it. They actually became the advocates for it, and the reason they were advocates for it was because it gave them that quality of care and it gave them that certainty. The other interesting thing, there's a chap, there's this guy called Look Back, who's written a whole book about how do you make emergency hospitals feel better, and his answer is you get your plan stuff sorted, because you know those patients' names, you know exactly who they are, and if you run that really sensibly and you get that down to working super efficiently, you make it much easier on those emergency sites because they're less complicated. So there's a fair amount of practical experience, but I think it's great that the Trust are actually being part of a further piece of research as part of some of the work that they're doing over the winter, and I think that's a really good thing.
Thank you. I'd just like to come back on that because...
Very quickly, because there's plenty of people indicating.
Okay, so I just wanted to say, in Northumbria where this has happened, 95 million was spent on building a specialist emergency hospital. So they've got this separate emergency hospital, and there was a study done on it that came out just this summer. So they've been looking at the results of that over about 5 years, and what it found was that there were no actual improvements to outcome in terms of death and disability. So actual patient outcomes didn't change. They didn't improve for that. So I just wanted people to know that. I've got a couple more quick questions. I'm going to be really, really quick. Sorry, they are quite
very quickly.
They are quite important.
Yeah, I can see that, Carly. So very quickly.
Okay, I will be very, very quickly. I'd like to know what proportion of people in East Kent will have journey times of over 40 minutes for option 1 and option 2. And I also wanted to say, earlier on, Caroline Selkirk said we were going to come back to the question of why there can't be 3 A&Es.
Yeah.
And we haven't come back to that.
Okay, so thank you. Good point. So, proportion of patients who will need to travel more than 40 minutes. Can anybody answer that question in the room? No?
No, we'll do that as part of the next stage.
And
And we can just go back to the slide if you want us to do on the other question.
Okay, so that work still needs to be done, so we can't answer that question yet, but you're going to do that.
Yep.
And what about the 3 A&Es? Can we put that slide up, and can Caroline, you going to speak to that?
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to make the as well.
I will get to him, I promise you.
Right. Okay, so just to summarise what I said before, we haven't had 3 A&Es since 2005, and the reason for that is there is Royal College guidance around specialisation of services. If we don't meet those guidance, we can't run those services. So, you know, it would be thoroughly wrong for us to promise you something we couldn't deliver. So that's why we can't deliver it. There's a real challenge about providing the 24/7 services on those 3 sites for A&E, and we know we're struggling with that already. We know that the staff need to work in more focused teams, and again that's more difficult to run over the 3 sites. And there's a national shortage of skilled nurses and doctors. We did give some consideration to that as part of the options, and these are the reasons why it was ruled out. Clearly we're in listening mode. That's the answer to the question as to why that's not been offered at the moment. But we're listening to that as we're listening to everything else people say.
Okay, can I ask you, in these last minutes of the conversation, to keep your contributions concise, and I will try and bring people who haven't spoken. So, yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay, going back to hospitals and also GP surgeries, would it not be possible to put people who specialise in welfare rights issues to address those in GPs, because some of the people who go to GPs are stressed out and suffering anxiety. Some people who go to hospital are stressed out and trying to do things to themselves, unfortunately. So would that not be a possibility, regardless what option we go for?
Yeah. Darren, do you want to jump in there? Because I know you've been doing some work on this.
Social prescribing.
Social prescribing.
Yeah, so building on some of the really good models of social prescribing, certainly in this area, and I know it's happening across most of East Kent now, we have, and they're called different things depending on where you live, but in this area, South Kent Coast, we call them care navigators. Yep. So we now have those attached to each surgery. Now, it may not be only that surgery's care navigator, they may cover a couple of surgeries, but they are very specific to do exactly what you suggest. Start to connect people to maybe voluntary sector, helping with some benefits, helping with getting some extra care, helping to start linking them to other parts of the health system. So they're pretty much somebody who can understand the whole patient's social setup, and if there are any issues there that we can change, they will start inputting those changes. So that's already happening. We've currently, forgive me if I get the number wrong, but I think we've currently got 9 or 10 of them in South Kent Coast at the moment. Have I got that right, sir? Yeah, I think it's 9. Oh, very good. So hopefully she was flying the flag. But certainly the early signs, and we are monitoring this, are very good and very helpful.
So more of that.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Lady, what's your name?
Sharon North.
Hi, Sharon.
One quick question, followed by another one. Is Kent and Canterbury option only on the table because of the offer from the developer?
Okay. Is there more to that question?
And if? Yes.
Okay.
I've got a lot of apartments.
Could you just ask it?
Okay, so is option 2 only on the table as a result of the offer from the developer?
Yeah.
If that is the case, why was Kent and Canterbury discounted from option 1?
Okay.
What were the reasons for discounting that and only including Margate and Harvey in that first option?
Got it. Okay, Caroline?
So back last year when the CCGs were going out to consult on option 1, the developer option came along. At that time it was considered to be such a significant offer that we should at least think about it, and that's fair enough. What we've done in this last year is we've gone right back to the beginning, and we've gone right back to, but we didn't have time to put that through all of the due diligence that we'd done with option 1. So if you're asking what we've been doing for the last 8 to 10 months, we've done that. We went right back to the beginning, and actually that option 2 made it through the criteria to this stage. And this stage doesn't mean that we're going to go out to consultation on both these options. It simply means that at this level of going through the hurdle criteria, these are the 2 options which made it through that criteria and didn't get dropped. Now we have to go through another really detailed set of evaluations, and we have to do a huge amount of work. So I can't tell you now whether both of these options will make it through to the final consultation or not, but what I can tell you is that the due diligence that was done originally That has been done, and that option made it through based on the same criteria as all the rest.
Okay, quick follow-up, is it?
So you're saying option 2 had made it through based on that same criteria?
Yeah.
It has now, yes.
It had.
No, because before, last November, we were about to go out and talk, and somebody says, here's a developer who's got an option.
Okay.
We hadn't done that then.
Okay, so at that stage, had Canterbury been ruled out as the major emergency site?
The only option that the CCGs at that time were consulting on was option 1.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, sir. You've been waiting patiently for me.
Yeah, I won't have enough time to say everything I want to. We've got a consultation going. We've got a conversation going on here, but certain things are not being said. For example, that there's the financial deficits in the CCGs, the special measures of the CCGs under hospital. I don't know where we are with the hospitals. Are they still in special measures? My experiences show me that we're getting a lot of waffle tonight. For example, I put in a Freedom of Information request to the hospital group some time ago, and they found out they spent £350,000 on consultants to improve their management, and yet we're still in special measures, are we? I don't know. That I had to go to the Ombudsman and over my own experience at the William Harvey, and the Ombudsman agreed with me that they were breaking the law. The hospital group were breaking the law. Now, I could go on and on and on, but let's have a real conversation about the things that matter.
Yes, sir. And give your hand to you.
Can I just start in respect of what the manager said there about a real conversation about things that matter? As part of your considerations, can I ask that you actually consider abolishing the car parking charges? Because if you've got a relative who's in hospital, your last thing is going to be worrying about paying car parking charges. If you're a member of staff, you shouldn't pay to park at work. And in Scotland, where this lady comes from, who's the chief executive over there, you've actually got free hospital parking, the same as in Wales. So can we not have a lead here in Kent and do the same?
Okay. Hospital parking comes up a lot. Who wants to pick up hospital parking? Please, Susan.
Car
Serious
parking
point.
and smoking.
Yeah.
So I think that we know that when you're coming to hospital it can be quite stressful in terms of the car parking. But just in terms of the reality is to provide the car parking we then have to spend money on the car parking in terms of creating the car parking, building the car parking, lighting the car parking, keeping the car parking safe. And that does actually cost money. So if we were to provide free car parking we would have to take money out of the direct patient care to be able to do that. So there is a national debate about car parking, but our reality is the car parking it doesn't cost nothing to provide the car parking. It would cost a significant amount of money to do that.
Well, don't we pay tax anyway for NHS? We shouldn't be part of that budget.
Well, that's why there's sort of a national debate on it. But at the moment, if we were to provide free car parking, we would have to take that money out of direct patient care.
Okay. Okay. So, lady at the back.
Two options.
Can you speak up? Just hold it closer.
Part of the two options is that the other hospitals that are not an A&E based thing have GP-led services, and this concerns me a little bit because GPs, as we've already been told, are few and far between in this area. It's really quite hard to run a GP practice with enough GPs. How is this going to pan out, given that you've already told us that it's going to be 12 years training for anybody being brought in at the moment, so it isn't an option at this moment in time?
Okay, Jonathan?
I was just sitting quietly digesting my ham sandwich. So, to answer that question, GPs need to have varied and exciting careers, and I think doing the same thing day in, day out is very difficult. And so I know a group of GPs who are working at the moment in the QE, A&E, and they're getting some really fantastic results, and we're implementing something very similar at the William Harvey, and we think it's about 30% of patients we think can be seen by the GP. Now, the things that we are enabling in terms of that happening is someone's made a decision that they want to go to A&E and they want to have their care in A&E. One thing we could do is say, actually, A&E is the wrong place to go. And the other thing we could do is say, actually, that's where you've chosen to go, but when you get there, we'll make sure you're seen by the appropriate person. And some of the things we're doing to enable that are, for instance, the idea that, I know we talked before about the clinical systems, so the IT, the computer systems, and it's really important as a GP that I can see what's gone on in the past, I can see what medication someone takes, and that makes it a very important piece of equipment to have, and we've made sure that that access is available in the A&E departments. So to answer your question directly, I think some people are choosing to go to A&E and they're receiving general practice sort of services. And I see in the future there's a kind of new thing on the horizon called urgent treatment centres, and that's a national specification which essentially is like a minor illness service, a minor injury service, some diagnostic services and a GP. And we expect that in East Kent there'll be a number of these services, and actually they'll probably be sitting at A&E or in front of A&E. I'm sort of looking to guidance from my hospital colleagues here. And I expect to see some of these facilities in South Kent Coast as well. And I also expect that these new and exciting ways of working for GPs will start to draw people into the area. And actually we're seeing that now, aren't we, with the minor illness service.
Good, thank you. Yes, sir.
Just a quick one. Really, it's about the culture of the hospital, and in a sense, our current hospitals and the new one or the new arrangements. Because you talked about being an advocate for services in Gloucester or somewhere. I said earlier, I go to Guy's for my treatment on my bladder. I've had bladder cancer and prostate cancer. I treated at Guy's, and it's a different culture than what I receive if I use William Harvey. I'm seen fairly quickly. I have a scan. The scan results are in within a week. I see the consultant. He tells me I've got cancer. He sees new biopsies. Well, that's the next Monday. The biopsy results are in within a week. They say you've got a week to decide whether you want radiotherapy or surgery, and then I choose my surgeon, and I actually book my appointment in the clinic there and then and go away with knowledge of when my operation will be. That's a cultural thing. My sister at the moment is having breast cancer. She has a mammogram. It takes 2.5 weeks for the result to come in. She has a biopsy. It takes 3 weeks to see the consultant at William Harvey. She then has more tests, another 2 weeks, and she's told she's got another 3 weeks. 13 weeks, and she's at stage 3, advanced cancer, fast growing. When she raised the issue of saying, what about the weight, his response was, what do you think's going to happen then? Your breasts won't explode. Now that's the difference. My surgeon, when I had my prostate removed, took my wife's mobile number, rang her as soon as he'd finished, to tell her the operation was fine and a success. That's a different culture. Now you've got to get a grip on the culture, because hospitals run well and people are confident in the hospitals if the culture is good. In our view, it's got to be a turnaround at William Harvey. I don't know what Canterbury is like, but I go to London because that's the culture in London hospitals I work with.
Okay, so let's give you an opportunity to talk. So I think a couple of contributions. The guy from Chepway Pensioners has also raised this point about performance. There are concerns that I'm hearing in the room about performance of both the clinical commissioning group and the acute hospital. So I'm going to look to Caroline and Susan to comment on that, please. So performance, culture.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I wouldn't duck back at all. So there are a lot of significant challenges and issues that we have, and I would accept that the culture is one of them. So one of the changes that we have just made is we've gone from, I don't want to go into too much detail, but the hospitals were run with 4 divisions and we've moved to 7 care groups, and that's important for 2 reasons. Firstly, it reduces the sort of span of control, but also we're putting clinicians in charge of the care groups because I don't think the culture is right. And from those sort of structural changes and putting clinicians in charge rather than having managers in charge, then I'm hoping that we will be able to hang a new culture on that, because what your sister experienced is unacceptable. I would apologise on behalf of the hospital.
To have the surgery,
but being spoken to like that is unacceptable. Yeah. So you can tell me afterwards who it was. but I accept it, and I think so I used to, in my previous job, I used to work very closely with Guy's and St Thomas's, and I think we all know that there are some hospitals that we aspire to be like, and we want to emulate in others that we don't. And I used to do a lot of work with them, and I have a lot of time for the way they work and so on and so forth. And I had the same ambition for East Kent, and the clinicians in this room would have too, but I would recognise that there is some work to do on that.
Okay. Let's pick up the financial special measures and...
So there are 4 clinical commissioning groups in East Kent, and that's important because each of those clinical commissioning groups has a responsibility for the local geography. So Hythe Kent Community Health Clinical Commissioning Group has responsibility for all the services in this area. But actually the clinical commissioning groups are all quite small, and we've only got one acute provider. And the truth is we weren't working very well together. So instead of using so good practice is good practice, whether it's in Canterbury, in Ashford, in Dover, in Deal, in Margate, it's the same. And actually what we're finding now is that the 4 clinical commissioning groups are working together, and the clinicians are working together, and that's really helpful because it means that the clinicians in Susan's Trust can therefore speak to one clinician who represents everybody and is actually talking about what good practice looks like, and then we can have a conversation about, well, how do you make that good practice work in the South Kent Coast? So I think that's been a real challenge. And then equally, the clinical commissioning groups have had a challenge in terms of the amount of overspend that they had last year. That's not a great place to be. We're not alone in that, looking across the NHS. But I think it's important to look at there are ways in which we can work together, and we can actually drive out waste, variation and harm. And some of the things that we do are not the best use of the resource that we have. We're not doing the best that we can for you with the money that we have to buy care for you. So it's important that we work on that, and clearly we'll welcome new money as it comes along. But I think there's a much more cohesive picture now going forward, and actually that benefits patients. And the feedback that I get from my colleagues in the Community Trust, from my colleagues in the Acute Trust, and from my colleagues in Community Care and the Council, is it's much easier to work with the clinical commissioning group now, because you're not trying to do 4 very slightly different things, you're getting one message, and I think that's really, really important.
Forgive me, Karen, just stay there for 1 second. I'm just going to ask this gentleman whether your question around the finances has been addressed. Or... Go on then.
Well, I've been to these meetings for about 2 years. Where was it? 2 years ago you published the transition programme. You presented the government. Every region of the country presented its programme to the government. This, I think, is ongoing from that. That was under the government's instruction to, if you like, work within the austerity programme. And that's what you're still trying to do. And that's where the tragedy lies.
So, Caroline,
so actually,
is there a way that you can explain, very simply, the actions that you're taking, if you're taking any, to deal with the financial overspend?
So, well, I think there are 2 things. I think the first thing to say is, if we had all the money in the world, we still couldn't run things the way we are at the moment. I know money is a factor, but it's not the driving force behind what we're doing. If we had all the money in the world, we should be asking ourselves, how can we run a sustainable service? And we'd have to address all of these issues anyway. If we had all the money in the world, we still have a moral responsibility to look at the amount of waste there is in the system. The waste we have for you as patients going up and down to hospital to have outpatient appointments, which you could easily have locally at home. The huge amount of waste we see in drugs that people get and either leave them in the cupboard or throw them out. This is enormous amounts of money.
And the $1 million they paid to the executive of Medway Hospital for 6 months' work.
Yeah, and the 7 million to Carnell Farrer management consultancy.
For 6 months' work.
Okay, well, we're here to talk about East Kent, and what I would say to you about that is
that is in East Kent.
I think there is a place for using consultants. And I think actually, we explained earlier that we've been back, we've looked at the options in more detail. We have been supported with some consultants in doing that. I think that's a reasonable thing to do. I think they've helped us and challenged us. And I feel much...
With successful hospitals. That would have been the best way to do it. Take within the NHS the next experience.
Steve, let Dave speak.
So what I think we are now is, I think in terms of, so we've got to take these options before we can go into consultation. We need to take them to a clinical senate that looks at all of the criteria, looks at the quality, looks at the sustainability, it looks at the access issues, it looks at the finance. We have to go to a finance committee nationally who are going to go through some enormous amounts of detail. And to be honest, I think we're ready to do that now, because I think what we've used the consultants for in East Kent is to basically help us, challenge us and go through all of our homework and make sure we've got all of this right. And this is part of that. And I know I'm just going to come on and talk about what's going to happen next. Well, I'm kind of ended up doing that anyway. But all of those things are really important, and we cannot go out to consultation. NHS England and NHSI won't let us if we haven't done all these things.
So, as part of the process that's going to take place between now and then, some of the issues that Dave and others are raising will need to be addressed, Caroline.
Do you want me to just address that now?
Not yet.
All right.
Not yet. I'm going to go to this lady here with the pinstripe shirt. Sorry, Caroline.
Okay.
More questions to come.
Thank you. As you can see, I'm of the older age group, a laywoman. I'm actively involved with 2 social groups in this area of probably about 115 people in the 75 and upwards age group. And current experiences, yes, of course it's excellent for people to be as little time in hospital as possible. I understand that. But I can think of 6 or 7 examples in the group I'm speaking of where people have had treatment of one form or another, come home too quickly, been readmitted within a day or 2 with problems. Not good for the patient, not good for the cost effectiveness, and misleading for the statistics. Yes, we've treated 120 people, but 20 of them have been treated twice. So that is one area of concern. And within the same group, another area is that people who have attended hospital, I'm speaking, well, of both William Harvey and Kent and Canterbury, where they have then been prescribed drugs or being discharged from hospital waiting for their prescriptions, delays, unobtainable, wait, and in a couple of cases, 80-plus years old women with sick husbands having to find their own transport to go back to the hospital on the same day to collect the drugs. These things need attention, please.
Okay. Are we sending patients home too early? Okay, you've got your hand up. Go for it.
So thanks for asking that question, because like I said when I stood up earlier, I'm really committed to trying to make patient experience better for all patients, but really close to my heart for frail older patients. So the first thing to say is that we do look really critically at patients who've been readmitted within 28 days. So we don't count a second admission as a new visit. We look at patients who've been readmitted and we look to see why that's happened, and we do that on a really regular basis. And part of the work that we've been doing with people like Dr. Cocker and with Dr. Bryant and other GPs in other areas has been around trying to address some of those issues. So there are some conditions, particularly long-term conditions, that I firmly believe can be managed in a much better way that completely exclude the acute hospital. And we know that large studies that have been done both in this area and nationally tell us that about 30% of those problems are related solely to drugs. So what we're doing around trying to collaborate, around trying to meet and discuss how we make things easier for patients, is talking about how patients access the type of expertise they require at particular times, sometimes without going to an acute hospital at all. So sometimes we take that out of the loop, which means that this issue of being admitted and then being readmitted unnecessarily will hopefully be improved on. The point that you raise around too many drugs, it's, yes, so, but I think that there's another point, and that's around, does everybody require all the drugs that they're on? And again, if we were able to bring some expertise closer to patients' homes, then maybe we'll take away that transport time. Maybe we'll be able to address the problem where the patient is. So I think it's about changing the way that we conceptualise care, because we conceptualise care, best care, as being given in a hospital building, What about if we changed the way that we did that and we started thinking about virtual ways of reaching out to patients so that we could avoid that trip altogether? And I know that, I haven't convinced some people because I can hear murmurs around the room. We aren't at a final product, but we're working very hard towards that goal.
How does that sound by way of an answer? Has she convinced you at all?
Yeah. I understand your commitment for now and the future. What I am speaking of are specific experiences within the last 2 years. And I would again reiterate, I'm not questioning the amount of drugs or who makes decisions on that. But when a terminally ill person is kept waiting for hours for the drugs because there's some slip up in pharmacy, I don't know what, or I repeat the example of a woman of about 84 being required to return to hospital to collect drugs for her gravely ill husband. How she got from here back to the hospital, I don't know.
Clearly not good enough.
But it's not good enough, and that has happened to people whom I know at first hand.
Okay, thank you. Clearly not good enough. Steve, you had your hand up. I've seen you. Sorry, I'll come over in a minute.
Yeah, I just wanted, because this is a listening event, I just wanted to check that we're actually saying the things that you need to hear, because you've got a lot of challenge this evening, and that's really valid and that's really useful. But, for example, this gentleman in front of me has given a vision of what good looks like. And as patients, we're all part of this as well. We're all part of the solution. So I just wondered whether there were other views in the room around what good looks like and what, because we've got to make some trade-offs here. So what is really important to people about what needs to be in it, I think would be really helpful.
There's a challenge there and a prompt from Steve to people. You haven't spoken, so hello.
Hello. Teresa. Hello. To answer the lady's question about the drugs, I worked in the discharge lounge for quite a few years at William Harvey, and can I say that when the consultants do their ward rounds in the morning, they normally say, yes, you may go home today, and that person takes that on board immediately. Now they continue on their ward rounds and perhaps go to another ward, and then much later in the day, the poor house officer has to come back, read through the notes, and then he has to write a discharge letter and do the prescription. That then has to go to pharmacy, and pharmacy at the William Harvey can deal up to about 300 drugs a day. Unfortunately, people shouldn't leave the hospital without their drugs, but the G4S, who are the transport, have certain, once the patient is discharged from the ward, then they go on the system ready to be discharged, and G4S plan when they can take them. And very often patients have left the hospital without the drugs because G4S are there, they don't want to wait, they want to get home, and that's perfectly normal. However, that does leave sometimes the patients without their drugs, and I don't understand.
Sack G4S.
No, I don't understand. There is 2 reasons why that might have happened. One, because the patient didn't want to stay any longer, they wanted to get home. Or 2, that there was a miscommunication, that they could have waited and got the drugs from their GP, because the GP does get a copy of the discharge letter, and I think that GP would, confirm that. So there is a long gap between the patient being actually discharged and going home by transport.
Okay, I'm going to come to you shortly. So, did you have your hand up, or it's the same point, was it? Okay, so there was a response. Okay, so let me just go over here. Yes, you wanted to come back to...
Yes, whilst I can understand where you're coming from, I can give you a practical example. 6 weeks ago, I was actually discharged from William Harvey Hospital. I was given a prescription because the drugs were not at the hospital. I was discharged expecting on the way to go home to go into the chemist. Yeah. And I was also told at the time I would have a further follow-up appointment in the next 2 weeks. I wasn't given a discharge letter, I was given a bit of information, a bit of paper, which said it had been done. Don't look at me like that, because that woman over there has got a form of complaint of me.
Okay.
Right, wait, let me finish.
Hang on. Right, very quickly.
Right, I disagree with what you're saying.
Okay, well, you're allowed to disagree.
You've also asked for ideas of what is good practice. I was discharged from the Brompton Hospital. I was discharged at 10 a.m. At the time of my discharge, I was given all the medication, I was given the confirmation appointment letter, and I was also allowed to go home with everything else that was associated with it. The service at the William Harvey, in my view, is abysmal, and that's without disrespecting the staff.
I'm going to thank you. We've noted the disagreement. We've noted that there's a different view. I'm going to come over to this point. We've noted the disagreement. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'd like to say what good looks like.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm a catatonic, so I shut down and go completely immobile. Can't move. Yeah, so you need to wear nappies from time to time because other people have to do that, obviously. I'm physically fixed in the position that I stop in. So I was on a train and I was meant to be going to somewhere around Peterborough, but I ended up somewhere around Leeds because I had a catatonic stay. A man on the train found me because I was wearing my SOS band because I was travelling such a distance. Called the NHS. The NHS put me into a hospital, put me into an ambulance. They found an ambulance they could free up, and they drove me all the way from Leeds to my house. And that was brilliant. The NHS are a bloody miracle. What they do, I thank you, all of you. I really do. You know, and like I've ended up in some strange places in my life, trust me. And some people have not been very nice, but everybody I met from the NHS, they have really helped me. Yeah, and I'm grateful. Thank you.
Okay, so we have 4 minutes to go, and I know that Caroline wants to move to the next slide. So unless there's anybody who wants to make a burning final point, I'm going to hand over to Caroline.
Thank you. So I just want to run over what happens next. So just to reiterate, this is an engagement event. There's a consultation to come. So thank you very much for everything that you've had to say, and we have very much been listening. So what we do next is we do a full evaluation of the medium list. So that's the 2 options that we've been discussing with you. And we confirm a short list. And that may have 1 option on it, or it may have 2 options on it. And we don't know the answer to that yet because we haven't done the evaluation yet. And what the information from the events and the listening that we've done is all part of that evaluation. When we've done that evaluation, we prepare what's called a pre-consultation business case, and we have to do a couple of things with it. So the first thing is we take it to the South East Clinical Senate. So this is a meeting which includes clinicians from every different speciality, right across the whole of the South East. And they look at our proposals again, and they look at them and say, is this the right quality? Do we believe it's sustainable? Do we think you could have the workforce to make it happen? Have you addressed the access issues? Does it make kind of financial sense? And they look at all of that and they provide a view.
Can that be webcast?
Sorry?
Can that be webcast so that people can see what's going on?
Well,
Could that be arranged now so that you're prepared? You know, openness and transparency would be a great thing here.
Okay,
good idea.
So I'm not going to give you an answer to that because I personally haven't been to the Clinical Senate because we don't get invited. I don't think it is webcast, but what I will do is I've heard what you said, and so I'll take that away, okay? The second thing is we then have to go to NHS Improvement and NHS England. And what they do is, again, they test all of the things that we've looked at, all of the criteria. They also ask us, we also have to go to a national scrutiny committee for money. And as I explained to you, we don't actually have the capital to build either of those options right now. So we have to get agreement from them on that, because it would be disingenuous and wrong of us to come out and consult on an option that we don't have any money for. So we have to get that money, so that's the next phase. We then go to public consultation, and that would be the 3-month consultation that you would expect, and that will be on 1 or more options, depending on what happens earlier on. After that, we then develop what's called the decision-making business case. So taking on board all the things that we've heard as part of the consultation, we produce a decision-making business case. There's then analysis and consideration of any feedback that there is in relation to that and the consultations. And then, after all that's happened, there is a formal decision made by the joint committee of the East Kent Clinical Commissioning Groups. It's our responsibility to make that decision. And then once that's decided, then we go for implementation. So there's a long process here. There's lots of interaction points. So that's where we've got to. So that's what happens next. And then finally, just to say,
you know, you can continue to read more. We have a survey that doesn't close until midnight on the 25th of November. On your tables, there is an evaluation sheet. Could you please fill it in? That's really, really helpful to us. Can I just thank you all for your contribution tonight? You've said lots of things that are to make us think. You've done really good debate. So thank you for that, and I wish you a safe journey home. Thank you.